Welcome to our class. In this class, we will look at security with respect to websites and with our database. You have often needed to log in to a site to access your account. So here is a typical login page where if you are an existing user, you would authenticate yourself usually by some kind of username and password, and if not, you would be given the opportunity to create a registration so that you can log in the future. If you notice in the URL, we're looking at HTTPS. This is secure socket layers. This is a technology that's incorporated into the browser that allows for an encryption and also an authentication to occur using what is called a digital certificate or an SSL certificate. When you sign in or log in to sites, especially that contain sensitive data such as a bank account, you want to make sure that everything is being encrypted because you don't want any hacker intercepting that information. What we have is called a digital certificate, and you can actually see details of it in the browser here. And this is given by a certifying authority. Most web hosts can give you an SSL certificate, which also allows for a folder in your web files where the secured files will go. So that is something that is set up with your web host for a reasonable amount of money. So this certificate has two purposes. Number one, it authentifies who you are, whether you are a client, a server, or a company. It ensures that you really are who you say you are, number one. Number two, it also provides for a level of encryption so that not only when you log in, but when data is sent back and forth, for example, you're transferring money in and out of your bank account, no one can intercept and find out that information. This is done with two keys. They are called a public and a private key, and they work in the browser and on the web server. And this is what the SSL protocol is all about. So when you land on a site that is HTTPS, that has a digital certificate, the public key is sent down to you, and that works in the browser so that when you log in or you do any other type of interaction after you've logged in, remember HTTP is a series of request and response back and forth from the server. So when you make a request, that request is encrypted using the public key that was given to you. It's the same key that's given to every user who uses that site. However, on the server has the private key which decrypts the information so that it can be processed. And these two keys are part of the encryption process that accompanies this digital certificate. These are the URLs of some authorities that provide it. As I said, most hosting services do, and there are various strengths. Most of them work with 256-bit. So user authentication, meaning our logins, is usually one of two forms. One is an HTML form that the developer would code. The other is done using the browser. The drawback to one using the browser, which is basic authentication, is that it requires the username and password to be sent for every protected page, which is annoying. Most web developers develop their own forms. So how do we do this in PHP? Usually, what we're doing is we're creating a separate table that has the logins and password. The login and password is not going to be with the user information. There's going to be a primary key and a foreign key that connects the user information somehow. However, when you log in, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be working with this table. So you're going to have a script that goes in there checking to make sure that that username and password exists. And here again, there's other information, such as an email address, because what happens? We forgot something, and it has to send us the email so that we can reset, usually the password. So what we have is when you register for the first time, you're creating a record in this table, you're inserting. And there will be a primary key, usually an auto number, that keeps track of all the records. So supposing someone hacks into your website and they get a hold of this table. Wow, all the logins and passwords are right there waiting for them. Isn't that wonderful? No, that's not how it works. When those passwords go into the database before they go in, they are encrypted. There are three main ways that you can do this in PHP. One is the SHA-1, the secure hash algorithm 1. The other is the MD5 function, and there's a newer password_hash function, which has some additional functions that allow you to decrypt it also. So when the user logs in, what we're doing, we're encrypting that password, and we're comparing it with the encrypted password that is already in the table. So that is how user authentication actually works with PHP. Takes a little bit of time to set up the registration and the login and the tables, but this is generally the way it is done. If you've ever had a problem where you don't remember your password and you call them up and you might say to them, "Can't you just tell me what my password is?" And they'll say, "No, we don't know what it is." And that's why. Nobody knows. Therefore, if someone hacks in to the server and they happen to get that table, they can't do anything with it. So your security is protected. Once we have registered, and now we're going to log into our account via an HTML login form that's going to be processed with PHP. We'll authenticate, we'll establish that, okay, this is a valid user. What we do next is we work with the session object, because as you go from page to page, it needs to check to make sure that you are allowed to access that page. And how we do that is once the authentication has been verified, has been accomplished, we start a session, we set a session variable, and then on each PHP page in this secured account, which is in HTTPS, we have this little if else checking to make sure that you are logged in, and if you are, then proceed with whatever's going on. If not, it will probably send you back to the login page, and you probably should have some kind of a timeout set so that the session can't stay open for too long, especially if it's on a website such as a bank site. Now, let's talk about security in the MySQL database and with PHPMyAdmin. One thing that we have not done so far in this class, only because it was easier to not do, was to create passwords. So the first thing you should do is you should set up an administrative user to replace the root. The root is the default super user, and every hacker knows that. So if they want to hack into your account on your computer, they know how to do that with root no password. So that's the first thing you need to do. You need to replace that. On a commercial web server, you have to have a login and password. They will not allow you to use root for security purposes. Another thing you want to be aware of, you want to watch your database naming. Don't use databases such as test. There's always a test database. Here again, hackers might be able to hack in and do malicious damage if they're trying to work with a test database. Another thing you want to do is you want to create users with certain levels of permissions. The super user, the administrator, has every permission imaginable, and that should only be used to do certain things. In this class, we were learning how to connect to a database and display information. You don't need 10 levels of permissions to do that. All you really need is read permissions. and maybe insert an update. So what you would do is you would create a essentially fictitious user with certain permissions, and this would be the login and password that you'd be using in your connection string when you connect your databases to the web, because those files were not HTTPS. There's really no reason for them to be secure. All they're doing is displaying data on the web. They don't have to be secure. So what happens if someone hacks in to the server and, oh, lo and behold, there's your connection string and there's your password and root. If that password and root was the administrator with every permission available, they could do some really serious damage. However, if it's essentially read-only, not a whole lot they can do. So that password and login is not encrypted, and if someone hacks in, they could see it. Therefore, always create a user that's going to be used for that purpose. Another thing that you should always do is back up the data, and a simple export command will do that for you. How do we work with some of these concepts? If you go back to the dashboard in PHP it would be different if you're using a different interface. There is an FAQ link and a how-to guides. There's a lot of good information here that explains a lot about setting up users and passwords. So let me review some of it. One thing that we want to do is we want to set the root password. Okay, so you could do this at the console in the command shell, or you could do this through PHP also. Here again, the FAQ link explains how to do this. Also, on the how-to guides, there's more information on resetting the root. On that page, which is not shown here, there's also a downloadable PDF, which is on Blackboard for you, which discusses how to reset it. If you wanted to reset it at the command line here, you could do that in the control panel, and this is the command that you would need. There are two ways that authentication is set. One is the auth type is set to config. The other is with a cookie. Now, when you set up your account, you may have had a choice. If you don't know what your choice was, or if you didn't have a choice, go into your files, the PHP files in XAMPP. There's the config file. Down around line 20, it will tell you if the authentication type is config, you need to go in here and change the root user and password also. You can see that's where it's set. If the authentication type is cookie, you don't need to change it in the file. It will automatically be changed when you set it using PHP So once you change your administrative password, this is what it would look like. You would see this login screen when you type in PHP after localhost. And how you would log out in the admin screen here next to the home, there is a logout icon. Another security in MySQL is all these administrative users. We have, about 5 different local hosts, 127.0.0.1, that have no password and all privileges, and they all point essentially to the same thing. So get rid of them. Why there are so many, I don't know, but you don't need them all. So that's another security risk, because hackers know this and they can try to get in here. So in PHP next to your list of users, this is where you can edit your privileges also. And when you go in there, you will also see the ability to change the password. So this can be done in PHP So these are the basic administrative global privileges that all of these logins, admin logins, have. So here again, for your connection string, on the left-hand side, you probably only need to select. Don't give the user all of these permissions. You should only have that for 1 or 2 people. So back to PHP there is a tab for users where you can edit the privileges and you can create new users. You can also remove those users. So you want to go in there, you want to set up a user for your connection string with just 3 privileges. On a commercial server, you can also add users. You will be the main user, but you can also add another user for your connection string.